You will die in prison. 7-year-old boy sentenced to life for killing his mother. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The fluorescent lights of the Cold Springs County Courthouse cast a harsh glow over Courtroom 3B on that gray October morning in 2015. What made this day different from any other wasn't the weather, the building, or even the charges being heard. It was the defendant, 7-year-old Jamie Cole, his small frame nearly swallowed by an oversized orange jumpsuit, his feet dangling from the chair, unable to touch the floor. I'm Mark Reynolds, documentary filmmaker, and for 10 years I haven't been able to shake the image of that child sitting motionless as Judge Harrison delivered his verdict. In the case of the state of Indiana versus Jamie Cole, this court finds the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. Due to the heinous nature of the crime, the defendant is sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. The gallery erupted in a mixture of gasps, cries, and murmurs. Some spectators nodded in grim satisfaction. Others covered their mouths in horror. Through it all, Jamie never flinched, never cried, never spoke, just as he hadn't uttered a single word since the night his mother died. It was like sentencing a ghost, court reporter Diane Miller told me. I've transcribed hundreds of cases, but I've never seen a child so empty. The prosecution had painted Jamie as a cold, calculating killer, a child born without conscience who, in a fit of rage, had pushed his mother down the stairs and watched her die without calling for help. The media dubbed him the silent killer, and Cold Springs, a town of barely 15,000 people, found itself at the center of a national frenzy. Detective Frank Mercer, lead investigator on the case, didn't hide his satisfaction after the verdict. Justice isn't always pretty, he told reporters on the courthouse steps, but evil doesn't check ID for age. But was this justice? Or was it something else entirely? The case against Jamie Cole was built on 3 pillars: his silence after the incident, his apparent lack of emotion, and the absence of any other suspects. No murder weapon, no witnesses, no motive beyond a child's tantrum, just circumstantial evidence, interpretation of behavior, and a community desperate for closure. Now in 2025, I'm reopening the investigation that sent America's youngest convicted murderer to prison, because something doesn't add up, and hasn't from the beginning. There were questions nobody wanted to ask. Thomas Gregory, Jamie's court-appointed attorney, admits now. His hands shake as he sifts through the case files he's kept for a decade. Everyone wanted it to be simple, a tragedy with a clear villain. But nothing about that night was simple. What happened in the Cole house on the night of October 17, 2015? Why did a 7-year-old boy refuse to speak in his own defense even as they led him away in handcuffs? And perhaps most disturbing of all, what happened to Catherine Cole in the weeks before her death that made her increasingly paranoid, increasingly afraid? The truth, as I've discovered, is far more complex and far more heartbreaking than anyone in that courtroom could have imagined. This is The Silence of Jamie Cole, the story of a child convicted by his silence, a town blinded by fear, and the 10-year search for what really happened on that autumn night in Cold Springs. But first, we need to go back to understand the last day Catherine Cole was alive and the strange events that preceded her death. 36 hours before Catherine Cole's body would be found at the bottom of her staircase, she stood in the produce section of Hartley's grocery, carefully selecting apples for Jamie's lunch. Security footage shows her checking her reflection in the polished surface of the refrigerator cases, then glancing nervously over her shoulder. This wasn't a woman simply shopping. This was someone who felt watched. Catherine had changed in those last weeks, Ellen Whitaker tells me, stirring her coffee in the same diner where she and Catherine occasionally met for lunch. Ellen lives in the blue house across from the Coles on Maple Street. She used to be so put together, hair done, makeup perfect. But that October she started looking haunted, jumping at sounds, checking her locks 3-4 times. The morning of October, FICE 16th began like any other. Jamie attended Westfield Elementary, where he was in 2nd grade. Security footage shows Catherine dropping him off at 7:42 a.m., 9 minutes earlier than usual. She lingered in the parking lot for nearly 4 minutes, scanning the surroundings before finally driving away. Jamie was a quiet kid, but not unusually so, says Melissa Pembroke, his teacher that year. She shows me a worksheet from Jamie's desk, simple math problems with careful, precise handwriting. He had friends. He participated. But about 2 weeks before, everything happened. He started withdrawing, drawing those pictures during free time. The pictures she refers to, which were never shown to the jury during Jamie's trial, depict a small stick figure in a house with a taller figure outside, watching. The prosecution later claimed these were signs of Jamie's disturbed mind, planning his crime. Child psychologists I've consulted suggest they point to something very different, a child documenting a threat. At 3:15 p.m., Catherine picked Jamie up from school. The crossing guard, Howard Dennings, remembers she was late, unusual for Catherine. She seemed distracted, kept checking her phone. The boy got in the car, and I noticed she didn't ask him about his day like she usually did. They just drove off. Store receipts show Catherine and Jamie visited the pharmacy on Main Street at 4:22 p.m., where she purchased children's cough medicine and, notably, a new door chain lock. They returned home by 5 p.m., according to neighbor Terry Wilson, who was walking his dog and waved to them as they pulled into their driveway. She didn't wave back, Wilson recalls. Usually she'd smile and wave, maybe chat for a minute about the weather. That day she hurried Jamie inside, like there was a storm coming, but it was clear as could be. Inside the Cole house, the evening proceeded with an appearance of normalcy. Jamie did homework at the kitchen table while Catherine prepared dinner, spaghetti with meat sauce, according to the dishes later found in the sink. At some point, she opened a bottle of wine. By the time dinner was finished, phone records show she had missed 2 calls from an unlisted number. At 7:36 p.m., Catherine called her mother in Arizona, a call that lasted only 3 minutes and 12 seconds. She said everything was fine, but I knew my daughter, Martha Linden says, her hands folded tightly in her lap as we talk in her assisted living apartment. There was tension in her voice. When I asked if she was okay, she said, "Mom, I've got it handled." That was the last time I ever spoke to her. At 8:15 p.m., Ellen Whitaker heard raised voices from the Cole house. Not like arguing, she clarifies. More like Catherine was upset about something. I couldn't make out words, just the tone. At 9:02 p.m., Catherine made a final call to a number that would later be identified as belonging to a local locksmith. The call went unanswered. By 9:30 p.m., the lights downstairs in the Cole house were turned off. A single light remained on upstairs, Jamie's bedroom, until 10:12 p.m. Then, at 11:47 p.m., Catherine's phone received one last incoming call. According to Ellen Whitaker, the front porch light turned on shortly after. From her bedroom window, she saw Catherine peering out through her living room curtains. I heard her voice clearly, Ellen says, her expression troubled by the memory. She said, "You can't come here, not now." Then the porch light went off. What happened in the hours that followed would change everything. For Jamie, for Cold Springs, and for a justice system that would ultimately fail them both. The 911 call came at 2:17 a.m. 7 seconds of silence, then a disconnect. When dispatcher Sandra Wheeler tried calling back, no one answered. Following protocol, she dispatched officers to the Cole residence at 156 Maple Street. "We didn't know what we were walking into," Officer Paul Daniels tells me, the first responder that night. 10 years later, his face still tightens when recalling the scene. Welfare checks like that could be anything. A medical emergency, domestic dispute, or just a kid playing with the phone. Daniels and his partner, Officer Rebecca Torres, arrived at 2:29 a.m. The house was dark. No response to their knocks, no sounds from inside. The front door was unlocked, Torres notes, reviewing her original report. That raised immediate concerns. People in Cold Springs didn't leave doors unlocked, especially not at that hour. Body cam footage shows the officers announcing themselves as they entered. The living room appeared undisturbed, a magazine open on the coffee table, a half-empty glass of wine nearby. But when they reached the foot of the stairs, their flashlights revealed Catherine Cole's body. She was lying at an unnatural angle, Medical examiner Dr. Vivian Harris explains, pointing to autopsy photos too graphic to show here. Initial assessment suggested a fall, with the primary injury being blunt force trauma to the back of the head, consistent with impact on the edge of the bottom step. But it was what the officers found next that transformed this from a tragic accident into something far more disturbing. I heard Torres call out from upstairs, Daniels recalls. When I got there, she was in the boy's bedroom. Jamie was just sitting on his bed, wide awake, fully dressed. Not crying, not asking about his mom, just watching us. Footage from Torres's body camera shows 7-year-old Jamie sitting perfectly still, his Batman pajamas replaced by jeans and a sweatshirt, as though prepared to go somewhere. When Torres gently asked if he knew what happened to his mother, he didn't respond. He didn't speak at all. By 3:15 a.m., Detective Frank Mercer had arrived, taking control of what was now classified as a potential crime scene. The lack of emotion from the boy was the first red flag, Mercer maintains, still, convinced of Jamie's guilt a decade later. Kids that age, they're emotional, they cry, they want their parents. This kid was just blank. What Mercer didn't include in his official report, but which crime scene photos clearly show, was the state of Catherine's bedroom. Dresser drawers pulled out, clothes piled on the bed, a suitcase half-packed. She was planning to leave, I suggest to Mercer during our interview. His expression hardens. Speculation. Could have been laundry day. But other evidence contradicted the simple narrative that quickly formed in Mercer's mind. A broken fingernail on Catherine's right hand with defensive marks on her forearms. A kitchen knife missing from the wooden block on the counter. Most puzzling, the back door deadbolt locked, but the key missing from its usual hook. The wine glass tested positive for trace amounts of lorazepam, an anti-anxiety medication Catherine didn't have a prescription for. Notes forensic toxicologist Dr. Walter Jenkins, reviewing the evidence a decade later. Combined with alcohol, it would have significantly impaired her coordination and awareness. By sunrise, Jamie had been removed from the home and placed in temporary custody. Crime scene technicians photographed and collected evidence, including samples from under Catherine's fingernails that would mysteriously vanish before they could be tested. At 7:30 a.m., the county coroner officially pronounced Catherine Cole dead, estimating time of death between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., at least an hour before the 911 call. Most damning in Detective Mercer's view. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of an intruder. Just a dead mother and a silent child who, according to Mercer's report, demonstrated suspicious behavior consistent with guilt. I'd never seen anything like it, Officer Daniels admits, his voice lower now. I asked Jamie if he was hurt, if someone had been in the house, if he needed anything at all. He just looked at me with those empty eyes. That's when I first thought something wasn't right. Not with the scene, not with Mother, but with everything. Something about this case felt wrong from the start. What nobody asked that night, the question that would haunt this case for the next decade, was perhaps the most important one of all. If Jamie had pushed his mother down the stairs in a fit of rage, as prosecutors would later claim, then who made that silent 911 call almost 2 hours after she died? For 3 days after Catherine Cole's death, Jamie sat in a small room at the Cold Springs Family Services Center, surrounded by child-friendly furniture and gentle-voiced social workers. He was offered crayons, toys, snacks, and reassurances. What he wasn't offered was the truth about his mother, or any understanding of why he wouldn't speak. It's not uncommon for children to become temporarily nonverbal after trauma, explains Dr. Sarah Lewis, a child psychologist who specializes in childhood trauma. She wasn't assigned to Jamie's case until later, after the police investigation had already focused on him as a suspect. What's unusual is how the system interpreted his silence not as traumatic shock, but as calculated defiance. Jamie's initial evaluation was conducted by Dr. Peter Hoffman, the county's on-call psychiatrist with minimal experience in child trauma. His assessment, which would later become central to the prosecution's case, noted, subject displays concerning lack of emotional response, no tears, no questions about mother, no visible distress. Hoffman spent exactly 37 minutes with Jamie, Dr. Lewis tells me, reviewing the session notes with visible frustration. He made no attempt to use alternative communication methods. No drawing, no play therapy. Just direct questioning of a traumatized 7-year-old, then labeled his silence as sociopathic tendencies. On the 4th day, Jamie was placed with emergency foster parents, the Gardners, while authorities tried to locate his father. By then, local newspapers had begun running stories with headlines like "Child Questioned in Mother's Death" and "The Boy Who Wouldn't Speak." He was completely shut down, recalls Linda Gardner, who took Jamie into her home for those 2 crucial weeks. He'd eat when food was placed in front of him. He'd follow basic instructions, but his eyes, they were looking through you, not at you. The only time I saw any reaction was when the news came on TV. He would immediately leave the room. It was during his stay with the Gardners that Jamie began to draw. Simple, repetitive pictures that should have been recognized as critical evidence. A house with a tall figure outside, a staircase with a shape at the bottom, and most notably, a telephone with what appeared to be a hand reaching for it. These drawings, which I've obtained from Linda Gardner's personal records, were given to Detective Mercer but never entered into evidence. When I ask Mercer about this omission, he dismisses their significance. Kids draw weird stuff all the time. It wasn't relevant. Dr. Lewis disagrees emphatically. Those drawings were Jamie trying to communicate what he witnessed. But nobody was listening. They'd already decided he wasn't a witness. He was a perpetrator. By the end of the 2nd week, with Jamie still maintaining his silence, the investigation took a decisive turn. Detective Mercer formally requested that the district attorney consider charges against Jamie. His report cited the subject's refusal to cooperate as primary evidence of guilt. Meanwhile, a critical piece of information surfaced and was promptly buried. Jamie's school, counselor Brenda Walters, had filed a report of suspected child abuse just 3 weeks before Catherine's death. Walters had noticed bruising on Jamie's arms and his increasingly withdrawn behavior. I was concerned about his home situation. Walters tells me, speaking publicly for the first time, about the case. I followed protocol and reported it to Child Protective Services. They said they'd look into it. I never heard back. When I obtained the CPS records through a Freedom of Information request, I discover why. The investigation was marked inconclusive after a brief phone call with Catherine, who explained that Jamie was clumsy and prone to accidents. No home visit was ever conducted. The case was closed on October 10th, exactly 1 week before Catherine's death. On October 31st, 14 days after becoming silent, Jamie was formally charged with first-degree murder. The IGA media erupted with sensationalized coverage, dubbing him the silent killer, and speculating about a new breed of child sociopaths. District Attorney Victor Hayes held a press conference announcing his decision to try Jamie as an adult, an unprecedented move for a 7-year-old defendant. The deliberate, calculated nature of this crime, and the subject's ongoing refusal to acknowledge his actions, demonstrates a sophistication beyond his years, Hayes told reporters. What the public didn't know was that on the very morning of this announcement, Jamie had finally made an attempt to communicate. Linda Gardner had found him trying to reach the telephone in the kitchen. When she asked if he wanted to call someone, he had nodded, the first responsive gesture since his mother's death. Before she could hand him the phone, officers arrived to transport Jamie to juvenile detention. His opportunity to break his silence was lost, and would remain lost for the next 10 years. But what was Jamie trying to say? And who was he trying to call on that crucial morning? The answer, buried in forgotten records and overlooked evidence, would prove more disturbing than anyone in Cold Springs could have imagined. Finding Melissa Turner took me 3 months. She'd left Cold Springs shortly after Catherine's death, changing her name and relocating to Oregon. When I finally track her down, she's initially hesitant to speak about the Coles. "I've tried to put it behind me," she says, nervously adjusting her glasses as we sit in her small apartment. After everything that happened, I felt responsible somehow. Melissa had been Jamie's babysitter for nearly 4 years. since he was 3. A college student studying elementary education, she'd been a stable presence in his life, watching him after school and on weekends when Catherine worked extra shifts at the hospital administration office. Catherine was complicated. Melissa chooses her words carefully. She loved Jamie fiercely, but she was always anxious, constantly worried something bad would happen to him. What Melissa reveals next was never mentioned in the trial. She was abruptly fired just 3 days before Catherine's death. It was so strange. I showed up for my regular Tuesday afternoon shift, and Catherine was just different, agitated. She said she wouldn't need me anymore, handed me 2 weeks' pay and practically pushed me out the door. When I asked if everything was okay, she said, "It's better if you're not involved." Melissa noticed other concerning changes in the weeks before. Catherine had installed new security cameras around the property. She'd begun checking the locks repeatedly and drawing the curtains even during daylight hours. She was always getting these calls that would leave her shaken, Melissa recalls. She'd take them in the other room, but I could hear her voice get tight, almost panicky. After one call, she came out and asked me if I'd ever noticed anyone watching the house. Most disturbing was Catherine's behavior toward Jamie. She started keeping him closer, not letting him play outside. She even moved his bedroom to the small room next to hers, saying it was safer. One night when I stayed late, I heard her checking his window locks, telling him, "If you ever see him, don't speak to him, don't even look at him." When I asked Melissa if she shared these observations with the police, her expression clouds. I tried. I called Detective Mercer the day after I heard about Catherine. He took down my information but said he'd call if he needed me. He never did. I wasn't called to testify. It was like they didn't want to hear anything that complicated their story. As our interview concludes, Melissa hesitates, then reaches for her phone. "There's something else," she says quietly. "Catherine told me once that she and Jamie hadn't always been the Coles, that they'd changed their names when they moved to Cold Springs. I didn't think it mattered until I saw this." She shows me a social media post from 5 years ago, a missing persons database entry with a photo of a younger Catherine under a different name, Elaine Sue Harmon, with a 3-year-old boy called Jacob. "I should have told someone," Melissa whispers. "I was afraid. Catherine said someone was watching them, and I think she was right. The thing is, I think that someone found them just before she died." As I leave Melissa's apartment, the implications are staggering. Catherine Cole wasn't just a single mother who died tragically. She was a woman in hiding, and if she was running from someone, then Jamie wasn't the only person with a motive to be in that house on the night she died. The question now, why would a small-town prosecutor work so hard to ignore this obvious lead? District Attorney Victor Hayes stood on the courthouse steps on November 5, 2015, perfectly positioned for the morning news cameras. His announcement that he would seek to try 7-year-old Jamie Cole as an adult sent shockwaves through the legal community. "Evil knows no age limit," Hayes declared, his campaign-ready smile momentarily replaced by a practiced look of somber determination. The people of Cold Springs deserve justice for Catherine Cole. What few people realized at the time was that Hayes was 6 months away from a re-election bid, trailing in early polls against a reform-minded challenger. The Cole case offered something invaluable: headlines. "It was political theater, plain and simple," says Judith Barnett, a former assistant district attorney who resigned shortly after Jamie's case. Victor didn't care about evidence or proper procedure. He wanted a conviction, any conviction, that would make him look tough on crime. The pressure Hayes faced wasn't just political. Cold Springs had never experienced a case that drew such intense national media attention. Satellite trucks lined Main Street. Cable news shows debated whether children could be born evil. Tabloids published lurid speculation about Jamie's dark tendencies. People were scared, recalls Mayor Philip Webster. There was this idea that if a child could kill his own mother, none of us were safe. The community needed someone to blame, and against this backdrop, Jamie's court-appointed defender, Thomas Gregory, found himself overwhelmed. A public defender with a caseload of over 60 active files, Gregory had never handled a murder case, let alone one involving a child defendant. I was drowning from day one, Gregory admits, the shame still evident in his voice a decade later. The prosecution had 6 attorneys and a blank check for experts. I had myself and a part-time investigator who was juggling 11 other cases. Gregory's requests for a psychological expert were denied twice by Judge Harrison, who cited budget constraints. His motion for a change of venue, due to the media saturation, was similarly rejected. Most critically, Gregory had just 3 weeks to prepare for a case that would normally require months of investigation, and he was doing it for a client who wouldn't speak to him. I'd sit in those juvenile detention meetings with Jamie, trying everything to get him to communicate, Gregory remembers. Picture cards, drawing, yes or no questions. He just stared. Not defiant, not angry. It was like he'd gone somewhere deep inside himself where none of us could reach him. While the legal process accelerated, something else was happening in Cold Springs. Neighbors who might have had valuable information about the Coles' home life suddenly became unavailable for interviews. Potential witnesses reported receiving calls suggesting they stay out of it. The local newspaper editor was pressured to tone down coverage questioning the prosecution's narrative. There was a coordinated effort to control the story, confirms former Cold Springs Gazette reporter Alicia Mendez. When I started asking questions about Catherine's background or the missing evidence, I was suddenly reassigned to cover school board meetings. As my production team sets up for an interview with Hayes, now a state senator with gubernatorial ambitions, I receive a call from the station's executive producer. The network is reconsidering the project's direction. There are concerns about balance. Our funding may be reallocated. 10 years later, the same forces that rushed to judgment against a silent child are still working to keep that silence intact. As we wrap equipment, a station intern slips me a thumb drive. Security footage from a gas station half a mile from the Cole house, she whispers. Recorded the night Catherine died. The police collected it, but it never made it to evidence. I ask why she's risking her job to share this. My little brother went to school with Jamie, she says simply. Nobody listened to him either. What that security footage reveals will shatter the foundation of the prosecution's case and expose a conspiracy that reaches far beyond the death of one woman in a quiet Indiana town. The security footage from Johnson's Gas and Convenience runs for 6 hours, covering from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. on the night Catherine Cole died. At first glance, shows nothing remarkable, just occasional cars passing on Route 16, half a mile from the Cole residence. But at 11:42 p.m., a dark sedan slows as it approaches the station. It doesn't stop for gas. Instead, it pulls around back where the camera angle partially obscures it. 5 minutes later, a tall figure in a dark jacket walks from the direction of the car toward Maple Street, toward the Cole house. At 1:37 a.m., the same figure returns, moving quickly now. The car's headlights flick on, and it speeds away. This footage was collected by Officer Torres the day after Catherine's death. I tell Detective Mercer, watching his expression carefully as I play the video in his living room. He's retired now, fishing and collecting Social Security. Yet it was never logged into evidence, never shown to the defense. Mercer shifts uncomfortably. Video quality's too poor for identification. Wouldn't have helped the case. Wouldn't have helped your case against Jamie, you mean? He looks away. Some cases are better left closed, Reynolds. I'm building a timeline board in my hotel room when the call comes from my producer. Our documentary funding has been officially pulled. The executive's explanation is vague, changing priorities and commercial viability concerns. I know what it really means. Someone doesn't want this story told. I decide to continue self-funding, even as my savings dwindle. The next morning, I return to my room to find the door slightly ajar. Inside, my timeline board has been dismantled, key documents missing. The message is clear. Powerful people are watching and they're worried. Working now from secure digital backups, I reconstruct the events of that night, revealing critical contradictions. 10:12 p.m. Jamie's bedroom light goes off, confirmed by neighbor Ellen Whitaker. 11:30 p.m. Catherine's car leaves the driveway, witnessed by paper delivery man George Santos. 11:42 p.m. Unidentified sedan appears on gas station footage, 11:47 p.m. Catherine receives final phone call telling someone, "You can't come here." Midnight, male voice. Heard arguing with Catherine. Neighbor Mrs. Henderson. 1:37 a.m. Figure returns to sedan at gas station 2:17 a.m. Silent 911 call placed from Cole residence. The prosecution claimed Jamie pushed his mother down the stairs during an argument, but the medical examiner's report estimated Catherine's death between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. The silent 911 call came at least an hour after she died. A 7-year-old doesn't wait hours to call 911 after killing someone, notes former FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Leon Nichols when I share the timeline. And he certainly doesn't make a silent call that ensures police will come. That's not a child hiding guilt, that's someone else making sure the body is found. Most damning, Santos's testimony about Catherine's car leaving at 11:30 p.m. was omitted from court records. When I track him down at his new job in Cincinnati, he's stunned. "Of course I told the police," Santos insists. "I specifically remembered because it was unusual to see her driving that late. They took my statement, but I was never called to testify." I return to Detective Mercer's house with these discrepancies, but no one answers. His neighbor informs me he left town suddenly, a fishing trip, to his cabin upstate. That night, as I'm reviewing footage in my hotel room, the power cuts out momentarily. When it returns, there's a single blank envelope that's been slid under my door. Inside is a police property receipt for one VHS tape, dated October 18, 2015. The description reads, "Surveillance footage, Henderson residence. Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor who heard the male voice, had a security camera, a camera whose footage was collected but never seen by the defense or mentioned in any police report. Someone inside the Cold Springs justice system has just taken an enormous risk to get me this information. The question is, why now after 10 years of silence? Robert Cole lives in a modest apartment in Columbus, Ohio. His walls decorated with photographs of a young boy he hasn't seen in a decade. Jamie's father wasn't present for the trial that sent his son to juvenile detention for life. Most people in Cold Springs assumed he'd abandoned his family years earlier. The truth, as with everything in this case, is far more complicated. I never abandoned my son," Robert says, his hands trembling slightly as he shows me court documents filed 3 years before Catherine's death. "I was fighting for him. Catherine was unraveling and the system wouldn't listen." The documents reveal a bitter custody battle that ended with Judge Harrison, the same judge who would later sentence Jamie, awarding Catherine full custody despite Robert's concerns about her mental health. She'd call me at 3 in the morning saying someone was watching the house. She'd changed the locks 4 times in 2 months. I begged the court to order a psychological evaluation, but Harrison dismissed it as a vindictive ex-husband trying to paint a devoted mother as unstable. Robert shows me emails Catherine sent in the months before her death, growing increasingly paranoid. One reads, "I know you're the one sending him to watch us. Jamie has nightmares about the man outside. Is that what you want? To terrorize your own son?" "I wasn't sending anyone," Robert insists. "That's what I couldn't make the court understand. Catherine's fears were real, but she was blaming the wrong person." The breaking point came 6 months before Catherine's death. Robert arrived for his weekend visitation to find 7-year-old Jamie with a sprained wrist and bruises on his back. Catherine said he fell off his bike, but Jamie told me his mom had grabbed him too hard during one of her scared times. I filed an emergency motion for temporary custody. Judge Harrison denied it without a hearing. 2 weeks later, Catherine moved with Jamie to Cold Springs, violating their custody agreement. Robert filed contempt charges, but by then they had disappeared. "She changed their names," he explains. "I hired a private investigator who tracked them to Indiana, but by the time I had an address, it was too late. Catherine was dead, and Jamie was being charged with killing her." Robert immediately traveled to Cold Springs, only to discover he had no legal standing. Because Catherine had changed Jamie's last name and registered him in school as her child from a previous relationship, Robert's paternity was questioned. By the time DNA results confirmed he was Jamie's father, the prosecution had already built their case around the disturbed child killer narrative. They didn't want me muddying their perfect story, Robert says bitterly. Hayes told me directly that if I tried to intervene, they'd charge me as an accessory. Said they had evidence I'd threatened Catherine. Robert's alibi for the night of Catherine's death is ironclad. He was in Columbus attending a work conference with dozens of witnesses. But his knowledge of Catherine's past could have changed everything about how the case was investigated. Catherine wasn't always Catherine. Cole, he reveals, showing me a photo of a younger, smiling version of Jamie's mother. When I met her, she was Elaine Harmon. She had another child before Jamie, from an earlier relationship, a boy she gave up for adoption. The revelation stuns me. Did the police know this? I told Detective Mercer everything, Robert says, his voice breaking. About Catherine's real name, about her first son, about the man she was running from. He took notes, said he'd look into it. Next day he called to say none of it was relevant to their investigation. As our interview concludes, Robert hands me a small USB drive. This is why Catherine ran. It's why she was scared. And it's why my son has spent 10 years in silence. The drive contains a single file, a restraining order filed by Elaine Harmon 12 years ago against a man named Vincent Harmon. The attached police report describes repeated threats, stalking behavior, and a final chilling quote, "If I can't have my family, no one will." Vincent Harmon was Catherine's ex. Robert explains quietly. He was the father of her first son, the one she gave away. And the last I heard, he was looking for her. This wasn't just a story about a child accused of murder anymore. It was about a family with secrets, a mother in hiding, and a man who might have finally found what he was looking for on that October night in Cold Springs. The Riverdale Juvenile Correctional Facility sits 40 miles outside Cold Springs, a sprawling concrete compound where Jamie Cole has spent the last decade of his life. At 17, he remains the youngest inmate ever sentenced to life without parole in Indiana state history. Multiple requests for interviews with Jamie have been denied. His status as a juvenile offender, despite being tried as an adult, creates a legal paradox that officials use to maintain his isolation. But understanding Jamie, his silence, his behavior that night, his continued refusal to speak in his own defense, is critical to unraveling what really happened. I've assembled a panel of forensic psychologists to review the case files, including Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a specialist in childhood trauma, and Dr. William Bennett, who has worked with juvenile offenders for over 30 years. The prosecution's psychological evaluation of Jamie was criminally inadequate, Dr. Rodriguez states bluntly, reviewing the court documents. Dr. Hoffman spent 30 minutes with a traumatized 7-year-old, asked direct yes or no questions, and when the child didn't respond, concluded he was showing sociopathic tendencies. It's unconscionable. The prosecution built their case around Jamie's silence and apparent lack of emotion, interpreting these as signs of guilt and calculation beyond his years. But the experts see something entirely different. This is textbook traumatic mutism, explains Dr. Bennett. It's a self-protective mechanism, especially common in children who've witnessed violence. The brain essentially shuts down verbal communication to protect itself from having to process or describe the trauma. Most revealing are Jamie's drawings from those early days in foster care and detention, images the jury never saw. Dr. Rodriguez analyzes them carefully. These aren't the drawings of a child who committed violence, she notes. They're the drawings of a child who witnessed it. See how the figures are always outside the house, watching? How Jamie draws himself small, hidden. These are depictions of fear, not aggression. But the most compelling insight comes from comparing two psychological assessments: Dr. Hoffman's cursory evaluation that labeled Jamie dangerous, and a more thorough assessment conducted 3 weeks later by Dr. Sarah Lewis, which the prosecution successfully blocked from trial evidence. Dr. Lewis documented clear signs of dissociation and post-traumatic stress, says Dr. Rodriguez. Jamie wasn't unfeeling. He was overwhelmed by feeling. His silence wasn't calculated. It was protective. As our discussion continues, a courier arrives with an envelope for me. Inside is a small folded paper crane, origami, with a familiar-looking address from the juvenile facility. It's from Jamie, I tell the psychologists, carefully unfolding it. Inside is a simple drawing, a house with two figures standing outside, one tall and one small, holding hands. It's signed with just the letter J. Dr. Rodriguez studies it intently. This is remarkable. After 10 years of silence, he's reaching out. But why now, and why to you? The facility's visitor log, which I've obtained through a Freedom of Information request, shows something unexpected. While Jamie has refused all visitors for years, including his father and his attorneys, he's recently allowed someone to see him, a young man in his early 20s who signed in as a family friend. Children who maintain this kind of prolonged silence are often protecting someone, Dr. Bennett observes. Not themselves, but someone they care about. Or someone they fear, adds Dr. Rodriguez. As I leave the meeting, my phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Jamie wasn't silent because he had something to hide. He was silent because he saw something no child should ever witness. The same words Dr. Rodriguez had used earlier, repeated back to me by someone who shouldn't have known them, someone who's been watching my investigation very closely. Jamie Cole isn't just a silent witness anymore. For the first time in 10 years, he's trying to tell his story. The question is, who has kept him silent for so long, and what are they afraid he might say? Modern forensics can reveal what investigators miss or choose to ignore. 10 years after Catherine Cole's death, I've asked Dr. Walter Jenkins, a renowned forensic pathologist, to re-examine the original autopsy report and crime scene photos. The medical aspects of this case were mishandled from the start, Dr. Jenkins says, spreading photographs across his office table. He points to the angle of Catherine's body at the bottom of the stairs. Look at how she fell. The prosecution claimed Jamie pushed her from behind, causing her to tumble forward, but the body position indicates she fell backwards. This contradicts the entire prosecution theory. A 7-year-old boy standing at the top of the stairs couldn't have caused the injuries documented in the autopsy. The bruising patterns are particularly telling, Jenkins continues. These marks on her forearms are defensive wounds, consistent with fending off an attacker. And these bruises here, he indicates marks on Catherine's upper arms, show a grip pattern much larger than a child's hand. Most troubling is what the toxicology report reveals. Catherine's blood alcohol level was 0.06, noticeable but below the legal limit for driving. But she also had lorazepam in her system, a prescription anti-anxiety medication she didn't have a prescription for. The combination of alcohol and lorazepam would have significantly impaired her coordination and judgment, explains Jenkins. She might have appeared intoxicated, confused, even combative. This raises a critical question. Where did she get the medication? And was it given to her knowingly or slipped into her wine? The most damning evidence, however, comes from a single crime scene photo that seems to have been deliberately obscured in the case files. Using digital enhancement, Jenkins reveals a partial footprint in a small blood smear near the staircase. This is clearly an adult-sized shoe print, he states confidently. Not Catherine's. She was barefoot when she was found, and certainly not a 7-year-old boy's foot. This footprint was never mentioned in any police report or court document. When I call Detective Mercer for comment, his wife informs me he's still away on his fishing trip with no expected return date. As I'm leaving Jenkins's office, my phone rings. It's my production assistant, sounding worried. The network executives called an emergency meeting about the documentary, she tells me. They're pulling the plug completely, not just funding, but the entire project. They're citing journalistic ethics concerns and threatening legal action if we continue. The pressure to shut down this investigation is mounting from all sides. Later that evening, I receive a visit from a network lawyer who explains in carefully chosen words that certain influential parties have expressed serious reservations about reopening the Cole case. When I refuse to abandon the project, he slides an envelope across the table. Your termination agreement, The network owns all footage already shot. Your personal research materials are to be turned over within 48 hours. I tell him I'll need time to consider my options. After he leaves, I pack my essential research, digital backups, and equipment into my car. If they want to, silence this story. They'll have to find me first. As I'm checking out of my hotel, the desk clerk hands me a note that was left at the front desk. The handwriting is childish, almost shaky. Melissa has a recording. Mom was scared of him, not me. There's no signature, but it's clear who it's from. And it's impossible that Jamie could have delivered it himself. Someone is communicating on his behalf, helping him finally tell his story. After a decade of being voiceless, Jamie Cole is finding ways to speak. And what he's revealing points to a conspiracy far larger than anyone in Cold Springs could have imagined. The note leads me back to Melissa Turner. When I call to request a second interview, her voice is guarded, almost fearful. I wasn't completely honest before, she admits. There are things I didn't tell you. We meet at a roadside diner 50 miles from Cold Springs, far from prying eyes. Melissa looks over her shoulder repeatedly as she slides her phone across the table. I kept this all these years, though I know I should have given it to the police. But after how they treated me, ignored everything I said about Catherine's behavior, I didn't trust them. The recording is dated October 13th, 2015, just 4 days before Catherine's death, and 1 day after Melissa was abruptly fired. She explains that she'd left her phone charger at the Cole house and returned to retrieve it when Catherine wasn't home. While searching for it, the phone accidentally recorded a conversation when Catherine returned unexpectedly with Jamie. I press play, and Catherine Cole's voice fills the small booth, tense and frightened. "Jamie, listen to me. We need to pack tonight. We're leaving first thing tomorrow." A small voice, Jamie's, responds. "Is it because of the man outside?" "Yes, he found us. I don't know how, but he did." "Is it Daddy?" "No, baby, it's someone else. Someone bad. Remember what I told you? If you ever see him, you don't speak to him. Not one word. Do you understand? Like the quiet game?" "Yes, exactly like that. Sometimes being quiet keeps you safe." The recording ends with sounds of movement, drawers opening and closing. Melissa looks at me with tears in her eyes. The next day, I tried calling to check on them. No answer. Then I heard about what happened. This recording changes everything. It proves Catherine was planning to flee, explains the half-packed suitcase found in her bedroom, and, most importantly, it shows the origins of Jamie's silence. His mother had taught him that staying quiet could keep him safe. But there's more to Melissa's story. Catherine confided in me once, after too much wine. She said she and Jamie weren't always the Coles, that they'd moved to Cold Springs to escape someone from her past. She mentioned having another child years before, a boy she'd given up for adoption when she was very young. This confirms what Robert Cole told me about Catherine's first son. The most disturbing part, Melissa continues, was when she told me Jamie wasn't safe even with Robert. I asked why, and she said, "Because Robert isn't Jamie's biological father." The revelation hits me like a physical blow. Did Robert know this? Melissa shakes her head. I don't think so. Catherine said it was her secret, that she'd never told anyone else. If Robert Cole wasn't Jamie's biological father, who was? The timeline suggests a chilling possibility, one that connects directly to Vincent Harmon, the man named in Catherine's old restraining order. As we're talking, Melissa's phone buzzes. With a text, her face pales as she reads it. "Someone knows I'm talking to you," she whispers, showing me the message. "The recording won't save him. Some secrets need to stay buried." "Who has your number?" I ask urgently. "That's just it. This is a new number. I changed it last month after the break-in." "What break-in?" "Someone went through my apartment while I was at work. Nothing valuable was taken, but my old photos, my journals from that time. They were all gone." Before I can respond, a dark sedan pulls into the diner parking lot. Through the window, I see a man in a suit step out, scanning the building. "We need to leave. Now," I tell Melissa, guiding her toward the back exit. As we slip away, one thing becomes clear. We're not just investigating a decade-old miscarriage of justice anymore. We're uncovering a secret that someone is still actively working to protect. Someone powerful enough to monitor phones, pull network funding, and possibly even frame a 7-year-old boy for murder. And judging by the increasing desperation of their efforts to stop us, we're getting dangerously close to the truth. The Cold Springs Police Department's evidence storage facility is housed in the basement of a municipal building, a maze of metal shelves and cardboard boxes containing the physical remnants of thousands of cases. Officer Diane Martinez, a 20-year veteran of the force, meets me after hours, nervously checking the hallway before unlocking the door. "I was on desk duty when they brought Jamie in," she explains, leading me through the narrow aisles. "I always had doubts about his guilt. When I saw your documentary team in town, asking questions, I knew it might be the boy's last chance." Martinez was the anonymous source who slipped me the property receipt for the missing Henderson surveillance footage. Now she's taking an even bigger risk. "Case files get archived, but physical evidence stays here," she says, stopping at a sealed box labeled Cole C. Homicide, 2015-073. "I'm risking my pension being down here with you. Make it count." Inside the box are bagged items from the Cole house. Catherine's clothing, blood-stained carpet samples, the wine glass with traces of lorazepam, but Martinez is looking for something specific, a small envelope containing fingerprint cards. "Every print they lifted from the scene should be here," she murmurs, flipping through the envelopes. "But look, there are gaps in the numbering. FP17 through FP22 are missing. What would those have been? Based on the processing log, prints from the back door, the missing kitchen knife, and," she hesitates, "and a partial bloody print from the staircase banister. The same adult-size print Dr. Jenkins identified in the crime scene photos, deliberately removed from evidence." But Martinez has another revelation. She pulls out a comparison chart showing an unidentified fingerprint against database matches. This was run through FIS, the automated fingerprint system. They got a hit, but it was never followed up on. She points to a name at the bottom of the report, Harmon Vincent, the same man named in Catherine's restraining order, Jamie's grandfather. "There's more," Martinez says, her voice dropping lower. "After you started asking questions, I pulled some old records. 2 weeks before Catherine died, we had a prowler call at her address. Officers responded but found nothing. Standard procedure. Was a report filed? That's just it. No. The call was logged, but the follow-up paperwork vanished. When I checked, who responded that night? It was Officers Daniels and Torres, the same ones who found Catherine's body. The implications are staggering. The officers who first responded to Catherine's death had already been to her house on a prowler call, a critical connection they never disclosed. As we're replacing the evidence, Martinez freezes. Footsteps echo in the hallway outside. We quickly close the box and move to a different aisle, pretending to inventory unrelated evidence. The door opens. Detective Mercer, supposedly away on a fishing trip, steps in, speaking into his phone. "No, he was just here." Martinez let him in. "I don't care about proper channels. This ends now." Martinez grips my arm, leading me toward a back exit used for maintenance. As we slip out into the alley, she presses a flash drive into my hand. Family court records, sealed by Judge Harrison himself. Catherine filed a paternity challenge 4 years before her death. DNA tests proving Robert wasn't Jamie's biological father. The petition named Vincent Harmon as the likely father. Why would she do that? It gave Harmon a legal claim to Jamie. She didn't file it. Her therapist did, after Catherine showed up with bruises she couldn't explain away. It was an attempt to document abuse. The pieces suddenly align with horrifying clarity. Catherine wasn't just hiding from her ex. She was hiding from Jamie's real father, a man whose fingerprints were found at the murder scene, a man the police deliberately chose not to pursue. As Martinez disappears back inside, my phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Cold Springs Public Library, Microfiche Archive, October 3, 2007. The accident that wasn't. Another breadcrumb, leading deeper into a conspiracy that spans decades. and May have claimed more victims than just Catherine Cole. The microfiche archives of the Cold Springs Public Library contain a single paragraph about the accident, a small item in the October 3, 2007 edition of the Cold Springs Gazette. Local woman involved in disturbance at Lakeside Apartments. Police responded to reports of a domestic incident. Female resident Elaine Harmon, 28, sustained minor injuries. Male subject fled scene before officers arrived. Investigation ongoing. 8 years before Catherine Cole died, she was still living as Elaine Harmon. The disturbance wasn't elaborated upon in subsequent editions. Like so many domestic violence incidents, it was deemed unworthy of follow-up coverage. But someone wants me to connect these dots. Someone who knows that Elaine Harmon and Catherine Cole were the same person. Someone who understands the significance of this incident in her decision to change identities and flee with her young son. My search for answers leads me to a coffee shop in Indianapolis, where a young man waits nervously at a corner table. Michael Harmon, 22, is tall with dark hair and familiar eyes that immediately remind me of crime scene photos of 7-year-old Jamie. "I didn't kill her," are his first words before I've even sat down. "I need you to know that before we talk." Michael is Catherine Cole's firstborn son, given up for adoption as an infant and raised by a family in Ohio. 3 years ago, he began searching for his birth mother, eventually discovering her real name and tracking her to Cold Springs. "I found her about 3 months before she died," he explains, his fingers tapping anxiously against his cup. "I didn't approach her at first. I just watched from a distance, trying to work up the courage. When I finally called her, she panicked, told me never to contact her again, that it wasn't safe." Despite her warning, Michael continued his surveillance, discovering he had a half-brother, Jamie. "I just wanted to see him, maybe from a distance. My brother, the only blood family I had left." Michael's account of the weeks before Catherine's death adds crucial context to her increasing paranoia. She wasn't imagining being watched. She was being watched, though not by the person she feared most. 2 weeks before she died, she spotted me parked down the street, called the police. I left before they arrived, but that's when I realized how terrified she was, not just of me, but of someone finding her through me. When I ask about his whereabouts the night Catherine died, his hand trembles slightly. "I was at a motel in Riverside, about 20 miles away. I can prove it. I checked in around 9 p.m. and didn't leave until morning. When I heard what happened, I was devastated. And when they accused Jamie," his voice breaks, "he was just a little kid, my little brother. I couldn't believe they'd think he could do that." Something in his story doesn't align. If you were 20 miles away, how did you hear about Catherine's death so quickly? It wasn't on the news until later that day. Michael hesitates, clearly caught in the inconsistency. I drove by the house that morning, saw the police tape, but you just said you didn't leave the motel until later." His eyes drop. "I wasn't completely honest before. I did leave the motel once around midnight. I drove past the house, but I didn't stop. I swear I didn't go inside." The timeline matches the mysterious sedan captured on the gas station footage. But if Michael was the figure seen walking toward the Cole house, why lie about it now? Before I can press further, he reaches into his pocket and places a small silver key on the table. "This is why I contacted you. It's from a storage locker in Westville. Our father's locker. Vincent Harmon. After Catherine died, I tracked him down, hoping to understand why she was so afraid. What I found..." He pushes the key toward me. "You need to see for yourself." "Vincent Harmon is still alive?" I ask, stunned. Michael's expression darkens. "Catherine wasn't running from me. She was running from him, and she had good reason to be terrified." As he stands to leave, I ask the question that's been haunting this case for a decade. "Do you know why Jamie won't speak? Why he's maintained his silence all these years?" Michael pauses, his back to me. "Jamie saw something that night. Something no child should ever see. He's not protecting himself." He turns, his eyes meeting mine. "He's protecting me." Victor Hayes' office in the Indiana State Capitol building reflects his meteoric rise since prosecuting Jamie Cole. Awards line the walls, Photographs show him with governors and senators, and a campaign poster in the corner hints at gubernatorial ambitions. The former district attorney, now state senator, has built his career on being tough on crime, with Jamie's case as the cornerstone. My request for an interview is initially denied. Only after mentioning certain evidence I've uncovered does his chief of staff reluctantly schedule 15 minutes between meetings. This case is ancient history, Hayes says dismissively as I set up my recorder. His practiced smile doesn't reach his eyes. A tragedy, certainly, but justice was served. Was it? I slide several documents across his desk, the missing security footage log, the fingerprint match. To Vincent Harmon, witness statements about Catherine's car leaving the driveway, all evidence that was collected but never provided to Jamie's defense team. Hayes' expression doesn't change, but he switches off my recorder. This meeting is over. Why wasn't the defense informed that Catherine Cole was actually Elaine Harmon? That she had another son? That Vincent Harmon's fingerprints were found at the scene? You're fishing in empty waters, Reynolds, Hayes says coldly. Those allegations are baseless. I have the evidence logs, Senator, the comparison charts, the witness statements. You buried. For a brief moment, his mask slips. You have nothing admissible, nothing that would stand up in court. As I'm escorted out by security, Hayes' parting words are clear. Sometimes justice requires difficult decisions. The community needed closure. Back at my temporary office, rented storage unit where I've relocated my investigation materials, I receive an unexpected visitor. Emma Parker, Hayes' assistant during the Cole case, now a public defender, has tracked me down. I can't stay long, she says nervously, handing me a thumb drive. These are emails from October 2015. Internal communications about the Cole case. Hayes knew the evidence against Jamie was weak. He suppressed anything that contradicted his narrative. The emails reveal a systematic effort to build a case against Jamie while ignoring all other suspects. Most damning is an exchange between Hayes and Detective Mercer about witness Harriet Gardner, who reported seeing a car matching Vincent Harmon's parked near the Cole house the night of the murder. Hayes wrote, "This witness creates complications we don't need. Handle it." Mercer's response, "She's elderly, easily confused. I'll make sure." Her statement doesn't make the file. Why come forward now? I ask Parker. Because Hayes is planning to run for governor next year. Because a child has spent 10 years in prison for something he didn't do. Because I can't live with it anymore. As Parker leaves, my phone rings. The caller ID shows Riverdale Correctional. Mr. Reynolds, this is Dr. Winters from the juvenile facility. Jamie Cole has requested to see you. He's speaking again. Before I can process this breakthrough, my phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Do not go to Riverdale. It's a trap. Minutes later, I'm served with a cease and desist order. Hayes' office is seeking an emergency injunction against my investigation, claiming harassment of witnesses and interference with an adjudicated case. That evening, returning to my motel, I find my room has been professionally searched. Nothing. Obviously disturbed, but small markers I'd set are out of place. On my laptop is a single post-it note. Check the hospital records from the night Catherine died. Someone else was treated for injuries. The conspiracy protecting Vincent Harmon extends beyond Hayes and Mercer, beyond Cold Springs, reaching into state politics and law enforcement. But cracks are forming as those involved realize the truth is emerging despite their efforts. Someone connected to this case was injured the night Catherine died, injured seriously enough to require medical attention. Someone whose wounds might prove what really happened in the Cole house on that October night. And the answer lies in hospital records that someone has worked very hard to keep hidden for the past decade. The storage locker in Westville holds the dark legacy of Vincent Harmon. Inside, meticulously organized files document his obsessive pursuit of Elaine, photos of her taken without her knowledge, copies of her restraining orders, address changes tracked through private investigators. Most disturbing is a journal detailing his determination to reclaim his family, Elaine and both his sons. Vincent Harmon died 3 years ago, his secrets intact. But the evidence he left behind finally reveals the truth about what happened on October 17, 2015. Mercer County General Hospital's records from that night show something the police deliberately overlooked. At 1:53 a.m., a young man was treated for a deep laceration to his hand requiring 12 stitches. He gave his name as Michael Harris, but the driver's license photocopy in his file clearly shows Michael Harmon, Catherine's firstborn son. The truth emerges with heartbreaking clarity. Michael had found Catherine and Jamie. On the night she died, he came to their house, not to harm them, but desperate to connect with the family he never knew. The confrontation went terribly wrong. "I just wanted to talk to her," Michael finally admits when I confront him with the hospital records. "She was packing to leave. When she saw me, she thought I was Vincent. She was hysterical, grabbed a kitchen knife. We struggled and she fell backwards down the stairs." His voice breaks. "It was an accident. I never meant to hurt her." The most devastating revelation comes from Jamie himself. After 10 years of silence, he's finally speaking slowly, haltingly, to a court-appointed psychiatrist. The transcript reveals why he maintained his silence for so long. "Michael told me not to say anything," Jamie explained. "He said they would take him away forever if I told. He was crying, said it was an accident. He was my brother, he was nice to me. Mom was on the floor, and he called 911. But then he had to go because his hand was bleeding really bad. He made me promise. He said being quiet would keep us both safe." A 7-year-old boy, protecting the only person who had shown him kindness in a home increasingly dominated by his mother's paranoia and fear. Jamie kept that promise through police interrogations, psychological evaluations, court proceedings, and 10 years of imprisonment. A silence born not of guilt, but of loyalty and love. DNA testing of blood traces from the kitchen knife confirms Michael's presence that night. More damning are text messages recovered from Catherine's phone, showing Michael had been contacting her for weeks, not just once as he claimed. When the new evidence is presented to the court, the response is immediate. Jamie's conviction is vacated. After a decade of wrongful imprisonment, he's finally released from Riverdale Correctional Facility. Senator Hayes resigns amid the scandal. Detective Mercer faces charges for evidence tampering and obstruction of justice. Officer Martinez is reinstated with commendations for her courage in coming forward. Michael Harmon accepts a plea deal for involuntary manslaughter. In a statement to the court, he expresses profound remorse. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted Jamie to suffer for my mistake. I just wanted to find my family." On a cold morning in February 2025, I witnessed 17-year-old Jamie Cole walk free. Robert Cole and Michael Harmon, permitted to attend under police supervision, wait anxiously outside the detention center gates. Jamie emerges, taller now, but with the same watchful eyes. He doesn't rush toward them. Instead, he stands still, studying them with a wary, assessing gaze that has learned not to trust. Too quickly. After a long moment, he takes a hesitant step forward. The system failed Jamie Cole catastrophically. Police who ignored evidence, a prosecutor who buried truth for political gain, a judge who allowed bias to overrule justice, and a community too eager to believe a child capable of murder rather than face more complicated truths. There are no happy endings in stories like these, I tell the camera as we conclude our documentary. Only new beginnings forged beneath old scars. The system failed Jamie Cole, and the truth took 10 years to matter. But for one boy who chose silence as his only defense, the world is finally ready to listen. As our cameras capture Jamie taking his first steps into freedom, he turns back briefly, meeting my gaze with clear, unflinching eyes that have seen too much. And in that moment, I understand that the greatest injustice was not just his imprisonment, but the theft of his childhood. 10 irreplaceable years sacrificed to protect a system that valued convenience over truth. Some wounds can never fully heal. But as Jamie walks away with his fractured family, his silence finally broken, at least the long injustice of Cold Springs has come to an end.